This is a Flying Cow production. Well, hello, and welcome everyone to Dis-cussions on the Flying Cow, the podcast where we talk about Disney and Pixar animated films from a different perspective, from the point of view that everyone wants to hear, that of a middle-aged white man. But I also like to bring in guests, and here with me today is the former Movie Battles champion herself, Nicki the Nova Baldwin. Nicki, how are you, ma'am?
I'm doing quite well. As you're aware of, I have a little bit of a knack for Disney and Pixar films. Some might say
just a little bit,
a smidge, like very minute part of my movie viewing. But I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, like I said, you are here. You know, we're talking about Disney, Pixar. So I am curious. You know, I mean, most people our age, especially your age, you're a bit younger than I am, grew up with Disney, but we like to hear kind of some details about that. We like to hear a little bit about your Disney history, your distry, if you will. So what is your background with Disney and Pixar films?
So like you said, I'm a little bit younger than you, just a smidge, but to the point where I was born in 94. So I know a lot of people, they gravitate towards the Disney Renaissance, their Little Mermaids, Lion Kings, etc. that came out more in the 90s. And I certainly watched all of them and loved all of them. My family had the rows and rows of VHS tapes. Nice. But in terms of what I grew up with and felt more of an attachment to, it was kind of the movies that they were actively coming out as I got older. And I think it's pretty fair to say that, especially in the 2000s, that Disney kind of went a little bit on a slump.
Yeah, so, not the strongest. No,
but one thing that did not go on a slump, and if anything, I would say probably had its golden age, was Pixar. Starting, obviously, I was one. I do not remember watching Toy Story, and if I did, it was certainly not when it came out. But I kind of, especially starting with Toy Story 2, which is, hot take, in my personal top 3 Pixar films, starting from there, it was just this very high upward trajectory of quality films that I was growing up with, making a big deal out of going to the theaters to see them. And I was kind of in that phase where it's like, they just keep getting better and better and better for my from childhood until I was a teen, honestly, and even to this day still into it. But that was very much where I felt more of the connection. Again, still love Disney, still eventually went back, watched all of them, but Pixar is very much where my heart lies more than anywhere else.
Absolutely. So I mean, definitely, like you said, during the 2000s, Pixar was on the rise. Disney was stumbling. I mean, I will say in some of those, especially some of those earlier things, they were trying different things, which I admire, but not the strongest of output. There's still a couple of good ones here and there, but
right.
So that does bring us to today's film. And I mean, when I asked you on the podcast, I knew, number one, I knew we were doing Pixar. And number two, I even said to you, I was like, I assume that we are going to talk about Up. And you said, yes, we are.
Oh, well, absolutely. Now, by all means, I do love a lot of other films. And I'll just give it away now. If I wasn't doing Up, my next choice would not have been a Pixar film. It would have been Wreck-It Ralph, because I have a very unjustifiable love for that movie. But like you said, Up in a weird way has almost become my brand in a bizarre sense of the word. I hate that I'm not wearing them, but I have an Up themed set of ears that I've worn numerous times on camera.
I'm pretty sure those are the ears you were wearing during the first Movie Battles tournament.
Oh yeah,
at least during most of the matches. Yeah.
Yep, I wore them for 3 straight, and then after that's like, "Oh, I should vary it up a little bit," but I'm very proud to have owned them. Maybe they were a good luck charm I should have continued with.
Yeah, so obviously, Up is a film that's very important to you. But like, do you remember the first time you saw this film?
Oh, absolutely. Not in as intricate detail as I would have liked, but
Sure.
2009, I would have been 15 at the time, and even as a teen, I was still very much into all the Pixar films. And generally, my mom and my sister, who's about 4 years older than me, we would always go see them, and that was kind of the um, not tradition so much. I think it was, hey, here's a movie that did well critically. Let's go see it.
Sure.
So Up was definitely one of them. And I remember being in the theater, and I was kind of in a phase where each one that was coming out was like my new favorite. Like, oh, Ratatouille, that's my new favorite. Oh, Wally, that's my new favorite. And then with Up, it was like, oh, this is my new favorite. And I very distinctively remember the trailers coming out for it, to where they very much only focus on Carl, and it's Carl Fredricksen has always dreamed of adventure. So I kind of had the idea in my head of, okay, it's this older dude who has the balloon thing going off somewhere. But that's, to the movie's credit, and that's what's so spectacular. They have the reveal of the balloons in the trailer, but
Yeah.
it's just as mesmerizing seeing it on film. Like, I was still just as awestruck. The amazing Oscar-winning score that just swells when it happens. It's an amazing experience, but it is one that I don't know other than at the moment, but it was not originally probably my favorite until I would say closer the last 5-ish years, to be honest, because I'm also a massive Toy Story fan, and I love Toy Story 3. Oh, new favorite. But I think,
Sure.
but Up in particular has grown on me. I think I'm a little bit biased because my mom loves it. A couple years ago, when Disney Plus had like just come out,
Right.
and out of nowhere, my mom's like, "Oh, Dad hasn't seen Up yet," and we watched it the next day, and he also loved it. He does not give a shit about animation, so to me, it was just wonderful.
It is one, and I mean, to me, I think that most animation is better than a lot of people give it credit for. But there are a lot of films, especially in the Disney Pixar catalog, that I would say transcend animation. It's not just a good animated movie, it is just a good movie. There is a reason that this film was nominated for Best Picture. I mean, and you bring up the fact that they give away the whole, balloon thing and all of that thing in the trailer. They could do that because that is not the only fantastical element in this film. This film has so many mind-blowing, like, that came out of nowhere, fantastical thing, but they all somehow fit together. It's this finely woven bit of cinema. And like I said, it's just a well-made film. I definitely also saw this in the theater. I'm trying to remember when or where. I mean, I'm pretty sure I saw it with a group of friends when I was living in Tennessee. But yeah, I definitely remember seeing it with a group of friends, and we all loved it. But it is definitely one of those films that when you revisit it, you remember how good it is. I mean, I talked about this when we did our ranking list with the Adams guys on the Cinefanatics. That this is one of those films that I'm just like, yeah, it's a good movie. And then I watch it again and I'm just like, holy shit, I forget how good this movie is. And even, I had rewatched it for that ranking, but I rewatch again because I make a lot of notes. And as I'm watching it, I caught myself just being like, you know what? I just want to watch this scene. I just want to watch this scene because it's just so good. Parts of it are just so good. You just kind of have to watch. But let us gonna go in and get into the meat of the film itself. Starting with the trivia notes. This is the part of the podcast where we give you just a couple of details about the film for you to know. As Nicki mentioned, this film came out in 2009. It was the 10th Pixar film, and it was directed by Pete Docter, co-directed by Bob Peterson, and the score was composed by Michael Giacchino, and it starred Ed Asner, Christopher Plummer, Jordan Nagy, Bob Peterson, among many, many others. So I do just kind of briefly want to get into kind of, for Disney films, we will sometimes visit the original story. Well, there really isn't a base story, but there's always like production notes. And I was reading the production notes today, preparing for this, just kind of seeing like there were so many iterations that this story took before it finally was its final form. Apparently it was originally titled Heliums, which I've never heard before.
God. I don't know if I knew that before. Oh my God.
I'm like I'm glad they changed that, because that's an odd title. I get it when I'm like, oh yeah, okay, helium balloons. Yeah, okay, I get that.
You also have Alpha's voice, which for the majority of the movie kind of sounds like he's on helium.
Yeah, that very, chipmunky kind of thing. But yeah, this thing went through various stages. The majority of the story was put together by Pete Docter and Bob Peterson. And Tom McCarthy also aided in shaping the story as well. And there were various things that went from things that sound kind of like a strange version of King Lear style story. There were some things that seemed very like they were going to go visit aliens and all this kind of story. I think originally, before they based it down to the house, it was this floating city. And then they were like, it'd actually be more interesting if you make it smaller. And, it's more interesting if it's, we deal with kind of seclusion up in the clouds kind of thing, which is when they brought it down. And apparently the idea of making Carl the main protagonist was based on a doodle that Pete Docter did of an old man with balloons with smiley faces on it. And the old man was all like grumpy, and this, there's smiley faces on the balloons. So it's like, well, that's just a funny image.
Right. 100%.
Yeah. So, I found that, and apparently there were also, even once they had like, the house and Carl and Russell, originally they were going to land in a Soviet era spy type of thing. And I'm just like, this story could have had so many different, and I mean, like I said, they ended up with so many fantastical elements, because you're not only dealing with a flying house, you're dealing with a talking dog, you're dealing with, a guy who's gotta be like 120, that's somehow still kicking around. You've got this strange species of bird. There's all these different ideas. And the fact that, this story could have been so many different things, but ended up cohering into what we now know as Up is it's so interesting to see where it started and then where it ended up.
No, definitely. But I think that's a huge strength of Pixar, especially in that kind of golden era of films. I mean, even just starting from the title Up, it's the most basic possible title they could have had. But that's how a lot of their titles are. They're one word, or they're like as concise and to the point of the plot of the movie or the themes of it as humanly possible. And I think that's to the strength of the movie. I forgot what like the rule is, but there's some kind of rule where it's like if it takes you more than one sentence to explain the plot of a story, then you're doing something wrong. So I think that's a huge indicator of the strength of their narrative, but it very much applies to this story. Because when you get to the basic bare bones of it, it's pretty simple of older man has a balloon house that he takes to fulfill his late wife's dream. That's literally it.
Well, and I mean, even if you want to boil it down even more to like, the entire story, it's about an old man learning to move on.
Right. Oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
Learning to accept love again, kind of.
And letting go of all the stuff that's reflective of like what kind of used to be, and being a little bit overly attached to the point where he's kind of also just closed-minded to other people, to doing anything else, to like his literal attachment to his house, but the ways in which he evolves throughout the movie, and the ways in which it shows like even just little things that like, oh, they seem basic on the surface, like at near the end when in order to get the house to float again, because it has so few balloons, it's like he has to throw away the furniture. And it's like, yeah, who wants to throw away the furniture that they collected with their deceased spouse?
Yeah,
no one.
That's tough. I gotta say though, I got a note about that, but I do have a couple of things that we want to talk about before we get too much into that. But
go ahead.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I do want to, before we dive into the meat of the story, briefly talk about the cast, briefly about some of the characters. And I think this is the perfect time for me to do a recurring segment that I like to do with the Pixar films in particular. And that segment is something I like to call Where in the World is John Ratzenberger? Yeah, where am I? Because as we are all aware, John Ratzenberger made a huge contribution to Pixar. So anytime we talk about a Pixar film, we like to discuss his contribution to the film, because even in some of those films where maybe he has a smaller part, it's always fun to be like, oh, that was John Ratzenberger. Ooh, where is he in this one? That kind of thing. So I know but would you like to tell everyone, Nicki, what did John Ratzenberger do in this film?
So he does have, as you said, kind of a smaller role, but in this film in particular, he is construction worker Tom. And his entire role is, so just to set the scene, Carl has refused to not give up his house or even the entire plot of land it's on to all these developers who are creating high rises. Understandably, he has this sentimental attachment to it. And Tom is just, as his name implies, a construction worker who Carl, when he's getting the mail, comes across. And Tom, like, he's a friendly, jovial guy. And at this point, we like in a good way of like he's telling it, but a way that conveys what's going on without like spelling it out like the audience is dumb. He talks about how, hey, my boss, like he's gonna double his last offer, like to shine so that these developers have been trying to hound him for a while. And he's a jovial guy. He's not, I mean, he's a little pushy, but that's basically the extent of his role in the film. Is that
I mean, he is giving us exposition, but like you said, it's done in a fun, I mean, it's done in a very a way that feels very natural, not just this is where we are in the story. Because we've already gotten a bit of exposition before this in a completely different way, and now he's kind of bringing us up to where we are now. But yeah, you're right. John Ratzenberger playing Tom, and even though it is a small scene, again, watching this, I forgot how fun this scene is, because it ends with, he's like, so have you changed your mind? And he, blows the leaf blower at him. He goes, guess not. It's like, that's a fun little interaction.
Mhm. Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah, but outside of John Ratzenberger, obviously we have Etta Asner as Carl Fredricksen. And a brief note for those people who are not aware of this, but the character of Carl Fredricksen was actually the design for him was actually based on that of classic actor Spencer Tracy.
That I have heard before.
Okay.
And I definitely see it.
Yeah, especially if you've ever seen the film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. I watched that actually for the first time a couple of years ago. And because I was not aware of this this connection. And as I was watching it, I was like, he looks like Carl Fredricksen. I wonder if they did that on purpose. And then I looked it up and I was like, yes, they did. They 100% did that on purpose. Because he straight up just looks like Carl Fredricksen in that movie. But obviously he was played by Ed Asner. And apparently when Ed got to see the character, he joked, he goes, well, that looks nothing like me. But obviously they did other things with the character to kind of fit Ed's personality and things like that. And then the villain, the titular, well, not titular, so what am I talking? It's Up. His name's not Up. But the villain of the film, Charles F. Muntz, the poor Carl, his hero turned villain. This is the epitome of what they mean when they say never meet your heroes, because they might try to kill you, apparently.
And they might be insane.
Yeah, but Charles Muntz was played by Christopher Plummer. And there were no specific notes of like his physical appearance, but his the idea of him was kind of patterned off of Howard Hughes, Charles Lindbergh, those types of very masculine adventurers who were also assholes, to be honest. So some good company there, but played by like I said, Christopher Plummer. I love Christopher Plummer. And getting to hear him in this film, I was really excited by. I will say that something that I actually discovered while I was prepping. So, obviously Christopher Plummer plays his hero, which we'll talk about this in a second, but the fact that they basically look the same age, even though Muntz would have to be at least 15 to 20 years older than Carl, makes no sense. But I was just curious as to the difference in age between Asner and Christopher Plummer. They were the same age. Not only though were they the same age, they both were born in 1929 and they both died in 2021. Yeah. They had the exact same birth year and death year. I was like, that's wow, that's crazy. But yeah, definitely. I was blown away by that. But so we also have Jordan Nagy as Russell, who was cast when he just his brother was actually the one auditioning, and he got just picked out because the director Pete Docter just liked the way he sounded and liked the way that he spoke, and was like, you're great, kid, but I'm gonna talk to your brother.
Which is, I don't know if you've ever seen, like, there is footage of him recording and Pete Docter like doing things to try and get him to perform to what
I heard that he like put him upside down and tickled him during like the Kevin scene and all that kind of good stuff. That's cute. Great. And then of course, Bob Peterson as Doug, which we'll talk more about Doug, but quintessential dog, man. I'm just saying. And Bob Peterson just does a great job. Like I said, Pixar has a history of putting their animators and directors in vocal roles.
Oh yeah.
So Bob Peterson is just another in the long line of a director, voicing another character. But in addition to that, you've got the voices of Delroy Lindo playing Beta. I love Delroy Lindo. Jerome Raft, the brother of what was his brother's name? Other Raft. Ranft.
I know who you're talking about.
Heimlich and
shoot. I should know that.
I think it was just Joe. Was it Joe Ranft?
Yes.
Yeah.
Joe. Yes.
Joe and Jerome. Yeah. Who had unfortunately passed.
Yes.
Was it was it Cars that was dedicated
to
him? I think
yes,
so.
I think you're completely right.
And then some other, nobody else is gonna know this name, but Jess Harnell, a very hardworking voice actor, the voice of Wacko Warner, with one of my childhood favorites, and a lot of other characters. And the voice of young Ellie, because we never gotten a voice of adult Ellie, was actually played by Pete Docter's daughter, Ellie. I was like,
she's so good though.
Oh, she is. She's great.
Yeah. Why she didn't do anything else is beyond me. Because I don't know if we're gonna get into it, but I love young Ellie so much. Sure. She's the kind of character that you would assume would be super annoying, but she's so hilarious and charming with how loud she is and just yells at Carl, and she's so great as her.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the one last thing I do want to mention before we jump into the film itself, and you already mentioned it, was the score. The score, Michael Giacchino, and I will say, you know who made me realize how good the score of Up is? You. Because I knew that was one of your favorite films, and for movie battles I like to correlate music from films that people love as their entrance music. And when I was like, let's just try something from the soundtrack for Up, because that was your theme music, and I was like, this is really good. This is really, really good.
And you picked the leitmotif of when the balloon reveal, and it's like all these, I'm assuming, like wind instruments that like flutter really quickly, but it's like whimsical and sweet and sweeping. Right. Honestly, I could talk about the whole score, because on my most recent rewatch, I mean, you have the leitmotif, but like even the scene when they first go to Monsters. Is it dirigible? That's how you pronounce it. The blimp. Even when they're first entering that, I was like, oh shit, this sounds incredible too. And it's the whole thing is incredible. Is not to quote another film, but it's amazing to listen to.
Yeah. It's really good, and it probably is one of those soundtracks that I could just put on in the background and just do other things and enjoy myself. But yeah. Great stuff. So I think it's time that we can go ahead and jump into the main film. If there is anybody out there that for some reason has not seen this film and you're listening to a review about it, first of all, maybe you should go watch the film, but just in case, it does follow the story of Carl Fredricksen, an old man who was recently widowed, and basically decides to fly his house to the place that he and his wife always dreamed of going, Paradise Falls in South America, and is accidentally joined by a young wilderness explorer, Russell, And along the way, they make friends with an endangered bird and a talking dog named Doug. And, like I said, Carl encounters his childhood hero who tries to kill him. And it's just lots and lots of fun. But when we kind of dive into the main meat of the film itself, obviously, it opens up with this kind of the very first thing we get, this old newsreel footage of the story of basically Carl's hero, Charles Muntz. And my first note is that I love the old newsreel footage. This wasn't the first time that they did it. They did something very similar with The Incredibles, even though that would have really happened after the heyday of newsreels. But this definitely would have been, I imagine Carl would have been a kid during like the 30s, which would have been, the prime newsreel time. For those people who aren't aware, back before there were televisions, the cinema was where people would go, and they would literally pay 50 cents to go and sit in the cinema for as long as they wanted. There would be, a newsreel. There'd be maybe a couple of cartoon shorts. There'd be an A feature. There'd be a B feature, and they could come in whenever they wanted. A lot of people don't know this, but the film Psycho in 1960 changed how people came to the movies, because it was the first film that people were not allowed to walk in the middle of. Because a lot of people would just come in the middle of a movie and just stay till the end of the movie, watch the next feature, watch the newsreel, watch the shorts, and then when the movie got back around to when they came in, they'd leave. That's where the phrase "and this is where you came in" came from, because it would literally, sometimes people would join in the middle of the story. So it's evoking this period, and of course all we see is the newsreel of the Spirit of Adventure. You almost feel like that was the A feature but the way it's presented, it was definitely a newsreel. But when he comes home, he's got a balloon from the Spirit of Adventure. We don't know what other features he saw. He didn't care as much about those. He probably did leave after hearing about his hero Charles Muntz. But and then we get, I will say, and it helps a little bit, obviously, having already seen the film. But when we are introduced to Charles Muntz, is it just me, or do you already realize this guy's an asshole?
A little bit. I mean, here's the thing. The guy definitely has an ego, because his whole MO for the movie is he wants to reclaim his reputation. And by all means, was it obviously Kevin and her species exist. So clearly he wasn't bullshitting that.
I was about to say, I am a little curious as to what those scientists were, how they came to that conclusion that this doesn't work. I'm like, was there somebody working against him in that situation? What was this?
I actually read this because I saw someone asking on one of my favorite websites, TV Tropes, like, how the heck did that happen? And someone pointed out, so maybe he reconstructed it incorrectly, or maybe they didn't have a basis of comparison, since it was obviously a new species. So I whatever the reason being, I mean, people make it's not stew out there, but by all means, the guy was clearly screwed over unfairly. But someone who has that level of obsession obviously has an ego, and so you have to side-eye that just a teensy bit.
Right. Well, and he's also, just generally speaking, painted with this brush of white colonialist, kind of has this air of superiority about him. I mean, he comes back basically, and this was a trope of that era, and obviously going and experiencing new things, which is really what Carl and Ellie want to do. There's nothing wrong with that. But going and basically those types of people, their whole thing was everything is just here to, build me up. Those types of explorers would bring in people for display a lot of times. And like literally with the idea that we're the only ones that matter. These people are beneath us. So there is I automatically just associate that with, oh yeah, he's an asshole.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, it's also the fact that he's obsessive. The guy's literally there for like at least not centuries, decades. He's there for such a long time. It's unreasonable.
Yeah, like I said, okay. If we are kind, I would say Carl has to be at least mid to late 60s, maybe even 70s, which
he's canonically 78.
Oh, geez, that's even older than I would have thought. So that means that Muntz is at least 90 to 98.
I have not read the book. I read somewhere that apparently in the Art of Up book, they say that he is somewhere from his 90s to early hundreds.
And I mean, with the exception of he seems a little bit more spry even than Carl, which I mean, by the end of the movie, both of these old guys are actually doing some pretty physical stuff. That I've got a note at the end where I'm like, my goodness, Carl has amazing upper body strength for an old man. Because there is that scene where he is literally with just his arms climbing on the blimp. And I'm like, okay, I'm in my 30s, in my mid 30s. A couple of years ago, I went to a water park and there was a zip line and I was the oldest person up there. And I'm like, why am I the oldest person up there? And I got up there, grabbed the zip line, let go, or jumped off and realized why, because adults, unless you're lifting weights, don't have as much upper body strength. The moment I kicked off, I fell immediately. I could not grip that thing at all. So the idea that he can do that at 78 is mind-blowing.
So what I've kind of read, and I think there's obviously not to the extent of the movie, but in terms of like their level of like fitness, you also have to consider that Muntz has been by himself in this place for so long. To some extent, he's had to like fend for himself. Like he doesn't have the same luxuries of civilization where he probably originally came from. So as a result, probably has to be amazing. He probably is in amazing shape just to get by, and has been continually active the whole time.
I mean, I definitely believe he's active. I will say, though, we also know that he has these phenomenally trained dogs. I definitely want to get into that because these dogs do things that I'm like, okay, the fact that he was able to create a collar where they could speak, that's all on him. He's a genius. Good for him. But the fact that he has dogs that there are other examples. Well, he has dogs that fly airplanes. He has a dog that is his personal chef. Now, aside from the fact that you put a dog in a room full of food, they're not going to make anything. They're just going to eat. Beyond that, how does that work? Because dogs don't have opposable thumbs. I'm just like, how?
I mean, we saw a little bit of it when he first brings Carl and Russell onto the blimp, and they have the one pour the champagne for them, and he has to do it with his mouth.
That is great, because I realized when I was watching that, I was like, oh, so a bottle of wine is really only good for as many glasses are out there at the moment. Because the moment he's done pouring, and I wonder how much actually got in those glasses, he just drops it on the ground. And then it just rolls around. There might be a little bit left by the time it gets, just because of the shape of a bottle. But there's not much. So he's wasted a lot. I'm also wondering, like, how much wine does he actually have? Like, how is he replenishing his stores here?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've read about like people's theories about that too.
Yeah.
And I saw this pretty funny comment of this guy literally created this insane technology to have the dogs talk. Why doesn't he leave Paradise Falls and get rich off of that? And it goes back. Yeah.
I'm like, honestly, explorers, not that big of a thing right now. And endangered species are kind of protected. So maybe leave that one alone. But your whole making dogs talk technology, we might, that might actually, go a long way to, fixing your reputation. I think you've been focusing on the wrong things.
Right. But again, that just goes back to he's an egomaniac who it becomes very single-minded about this one goal that he can't see past it.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. But I don't want to honestly, I don't care about exact order, but I do want to make sure that we talk about the important things. Obviously, after we get that little thing, which I am curious where both young Carl and Ellie got their aviator goggles in the cap, because I'm just like, okay, were those just everywhere in the 30s? But there is obviously the introduction of Ellie, who, as you mentioned before, is a fantastic character. And so much is made about how insulated old Carl is, but if you pay attention, Carl is an introvert as a person. That's just who he is. Before he met Ellie, it's not like he was surrounded by a whole bunch of friends. He was he was a quiet kid. He was a quiet, introverted kid. And it took, somebody like Ellie or eventually Russell to basically force their way into his life, to, bring more to it. I myself am a very introverted person, and I have certainly reached out and made friends myself, but I can definitely tell you there are people that I never would have met if they hadn't, made the first step and, just randomly, oh, you like this thing? I like this thing. We're best friends now. I'm like, oh, okay. The whole time I'm just like, I don't know why this person is my friend, but I like that they are,
I mean, and I think
I was just, to tie that in, I'm sure that they're, in that, I think part of why Ellie was so special to him is because he is not a person that easily makes relationships. So it's like, I caught this lightning in a bottle. I don't know how I did it. I don't think I could ever replicate it again. So I'm going to hold as tight to this as I possibly can. So I really feel for Carl.
I mean, I was going to say, like, what kind of drives that home is compared to young Ellie, who talks a mile a minute, is a huge chatterbox who's yelling at him half the time. I think aside from like some surprise noises, I think Carl says, wow, when he's a kid. And that's the one line we have from him the whole time. And that's him being mesmerized by her, which I think really speaks to that point.
Yeah, there really is. Yeah. Although I will say, young Carl is very quiet, just like, old Carl, although old Carl's, grumpy enough to still be a little bit more vocal. But we cannot forget that monumental hair that young Carl has. That swoop, that hair is insane. I was just like, my goodness. And he has that hair for like a good bit. It's not until he gets older that it kind of, he's got that natural bouffant, that just kind of, that just kind of lives on top of his head, and it's not until he starts getting older that it starts to kind of flatten down a little bit. But yeah, I was just like, that hair, man.
Well, I think that's what's funny, especially when they're kids. Their designs, I mean, Carl like kind of has an eccentric design. He's literally a box the whole time. But
absolutely. Yeah.
But especially as kids, because Ellie, like, I think also to kind of illustrate like her own zaniness and her outgoing nature, like she has the crazy hair that like pops up the second she takes it off. And I think a lot of that kind of shows that contrast, because like she has the circular like visual motif, especially like as illustrated with the chairs, and he has the box. So that's the other thing. It shows how much they contrast. And I think that's like a little detail that really illustrates their personalities, that I think especially like is effective in the beginning of the movie and when they're younger, just to show like their personalities, even in the famous opening 10 minutes where they're not even talking the whole time.
That opening 10 minutes. And I will say, I do think that people discount the rest of the film because that first 10 minutes is exquisite.
Oh my God.
It really is. It is a perfect, I mean, you know, excluding the spirit of adventure stuff, setting that stuff up, that little bit of showing there is one of the most perfect silent shorts I have seen. Like it is beautiful, tells a wonderful story, no dialogue at all, just images, and we know exactly what's going on. You know, we don't need those extra, and you know, by the end of it, you are in tears. You get how, you know, special and important this relationship was, you know, just through these images. But yeah, it's beautiful storytelling.
I mean, I'd go a step further and say that whole sequence is probably the single greatest thing Pixar has created. I don't think there's anything that even comes close to it. And I mean, again, we'll certainly get into the rest of the movie and the bone I have to pick with people who claim that the rest of the movie is shit. But that whole sequence is so gorgeous and mesmerizing. Again, we bring back the score and how it accentuates it, like, because it starts with their little wedding march, but then it goes into, again, the iconic leitmotif, and then the way during like the lows of their life together and the way it descends, it complements it perfectly. But again, it shows all these highs and lows without a bit of dialogue, because it just, and that's the most effective form of storytelling for a reason.
Right. And I will say, couple of notes. Number one, before we get into that, when after, you know, the whole scene with Ellie where he falls and breaks his arm and all of that kind of good stuff, when she comes back, first of all, when she comes back in, he screams and we see no parents run into the room. I'm just like, okay, your child has just broken his arm and you don't run into the room. Do Carl's parents secretly suck? Is that what we're getting from this? Is this another reason why Carl is so attached to Ellie? Because she's really literally the only good thing in his life.
I mean, I think that's actually answered a little bit in the montage, because when they get to the wedding, they show each side of they're just parties.
So severe, yeah.
But what's so funny is, and I never realized this until I rewatched it recently, on Ellie's side where they're all crazy and screaming excited for them, there's like a pair of legs just shooting up out of one of the pews. I don't even see the front of their body, and just like kicking like excitedly. I'm just like, that's a really bizarre detail. But I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely all your stereotypical idea of hillbillies, you know, country people. You know, whereas, you know, like you said, Carl's family looks like, I can't remember the name of that painting, but the famous painting with the farmer and his wife.
And the wife, yeah. That's because like none of them even look the slightest bit happy. They're all very dour and like just politely clap.
And they're all wearing that same pair of glasses that Carl's wearing. Yeah. But yeah, there's that. And then there's also, and I didn't really think about it until this most recent watch, but they jump from them as kids and him going, to immediately they're married is the very first thing that we get in that montage. And I'm just like, whoa, that was quick. All right. Let's
It
go
is.
time.
It is, but again, I think that's a very effective storytelling method, because if that was the end game, I don't know if it would have been necessary. Like, okay, and here's like when
to
they
show
started
them
dating,
dating as kids or as teenagers. Yeah, I mean that.
right?
What's really important at this point now is to show them in their lives together.
Right. That's all
and
that.
it would
That's
have been
what that had to do.
creepy to show them together too much before that.
Right. I think it works perfectly. And again, it's a good sequence and a good transition into that whole montage.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so we, like you said, there are a couple of things that we get in this montage, things that I never noticed before, because I remember after the last watch, I was like, they talk all the time about how they want to go to South America, they want to go, to Paradise Falls, but they never actually say where Paradise Falls is. And I mean, obviously, when I was reading the production, stuff, I realized that they, a lot of it was based on Venezuela. And I was like, oh, okay. But there's also the scene where he goes to buy the plane tickets, and briefly you can see on that he buys plane tickets to Venezuela. And I was like, oh, that's where Paradise Falls is. Very nice. So there are these little details and little things here and there. We talked I guess before we do that. So yeah, so they have that whole thing. It's sad, obviously. Eventually we are introduced to Russell. He's a wilderness explorer. I will say the whole thing with Russell is, and I think this is an interesting fine line, because he has all of these like badges and stuff like that. And in a lot of places, they show the knowledge that he does have. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But then there are some places where he's obviously lacking, and they use that to show the absence of his dad kind of thing. But I'm just like, I feel like some of those badges, some of that knowledge would have been necessary, because the only one he's missing is the assisting the elderly badge. And, he, obviously famously has that, he doesn't know how to make a tent. I feel like in a wilderness explorers, making a tent would be pretty prominently intricate in at least one of those badges.
I mean, that's a good point. And again, this was another theory I read of someone asking, like, why the hell doesn't he know how to make the tent? And honestly, like, the best one I could possibly read is like, well, maybe someone helped him like create it. Like,
yeah, I mean, I was like, did we cheat on that one? Is that the situation? But even then, somebody should have showed him if they were doing it for him or something like that. Yeah.
Or maybe like also consider, I don't know why I believe this. I believe he's supposed to be 8. So I think to me, a slightly more non-nefarious explanation is like, these are little boys, like they probably are like trying to do solids for each other. I'm sure he helps someone else with something else. But I mean, I totally agree. It's a little questionable that he doesn't know how to do the tent, even with the absence of his dad as a wilderness explorer and someone who takes that much pride in it. But at the same time, maybe they're also trying to demonstrate that he really like admires like being an explorer. That's what he wants. But maybe he, like, with the grittier aspects of it, he struggles a little bit more, especially if he's someone who lives in the city, doesn't go out, doesn't camp. I think it makes a little more sense.
Well, and I think, if I'm remembering correctly, the majority of the knowledge that he does possess is more like book learning. Like he possesses, knowledge about like animals and stuff like that. So that is something that you wouldn't necessarily need practical experience for. So, I guess that does make sense. But I will say, if you pay attention at the end, because before Russell's given his badge for, assisting the elderly, which that sounds legit. I could believe, like, that sounds, I'm sure there's probably an assisting the elderly badge in the Boy Scouts. But if you listen to the badges that the two kids before him get, extreme mountaineering lore. So basically, they're just telling exciting stories about mountaineering. Is that what that is? And then wild animal defensive arts, which, I mean, I suppose if you break it down, it's like, okay, what do you do if a bear attacks? Something like that. But when I first hear that, I'm like, are we teaching them to fight animals? Like, what's going on here?
It's definitely a little bit bizarre. I have to think that it's like, okay, we're like leading, this is kind of inconsequential to the actual story. Let's just go batshit crazy at this point.
I was about to say, I'm sure those are just in there for the people. It's like, let's see if people are paying attention right now. Yeah, and because I will say, this is the first time that I actually paid attention to what those badges were for, and I was like, what the fuck? What are we doing here? But yeah, so let's see. Obviously, talking about Russell, one of my favorite things about Russell is, it's the way we're introduced to him. I love his voice anytime he reads, because it's that very rote, I am reading this thing right now. This is a book that I have been told to read. I am going to read this book.
Yeah.
There's no emotion to it, no thought about it whatsoever. It's just love it.
This is the funny part. Anytime I rewatch the movie, because that's his first scene, is he's reading from the book when he's trying to assist Carl. Every time I start this movie, I always think to myself for a second, like, ooh, like his delivery is a little rough. And then once like we get to an actual scene where he's talking normally, it's like, okay, now I remember.
Yeah, I love that. And I love it that they do that every single time he has to read something. Because this is, and I think one of the reasons I love it so much is because it is so completely different from how he actually speaks. It's that weird juxtaposition of this very robotic, very stilted, I am just giving you information, and then, hey, Mr. Fredrickson, blah 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 blah. It's night and day, which is why I love it so much. Yeah. But yeah, so we have the inciting incident to this whole thing, which is, guy backs into his mailbox. There's the altercation. He hits him in, and I will say, obviously you shouldn't hit people with things, blah blah blah, whatever. But you break somebody's stuff, and they're like, "Give it to me." You don't insist. No, let me fix that. Especially if you can tell that it is like, if I were that dude, I would have just been like, I'm so sorry, sir. If there's anything that we can do to help you, you let us know. You don't insist on further, messing with his stuff. That's right. That was the whole reason he was upset, because you were messing with his shit. Leave his shit alone.
You should have.
That's how you fix this.
Oh yeah. I mean, by all means, no, like, the one credit I'll kind of give him is you see him like as like the bulldozer's going through. He's like trying to tell it like, stop. Okay, please stop.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So one, he did that. But two, keep in mind, like, here's a blue collar construction worker who's basically at the beck and call of this corrupt corporate executive. So you also don't know like what they're kind of told the procedures. I certainly don't know anything about construction work, and but no, I mean, he absolutely should have after a certain point. So the whole thing is, it's just an uncomfortable, I would say, like, just misunderstanding. And but by all means, it's like I also get why Carl was so protective of it, because once he gets home, you see like how much he has like roped off the entire mailbox.
It's bungeed and everything. I will say that is one thing that I was surprised about, that he didn't take the mailbox with him when he took off.
Yeah, It's hard to
Unless
say.
he did and I didn't notice.
I don't believe he does. I have to check because the one thing that I always forget to check when I'm watching is you see at night when he knows that he's about to go to Shady Oaks and he like concocts the plan. They have the shot of his house, like the outside of his house at night, and then it goes to the next day with all the helium cans outside.
Yeah.
So that's one of those details I always forget to check for whenever I watch it.
Sure. I mean, I will say that is one place where I'm just like, okay, I kind of get what they are doing here, but at the same time, I almost have to tell myself, no, he was planning this for months. This was just the inciting incident for him to do it, because there is no way that he thought of that and put everything into motion in one night. Because by the time
I very much disagree.
He would have at least had to have the balloons and the canisters already.
Well, not so. This is a little bit of an out there theory
because it was that night,
right?
He came back at night.
So my kind of out there theory, and again at the end of the day, this is like really nitpicky. The theory that I've seen that I feel like probably explains it, because I do genuinely believe he thought of it that night because he saw the book.
I mean, they definitely make it look like he does. I have a hard time making that make sense.
So here's what I'm thinking: is he was a veteran employee at that zoo as a balloon person. He probably
that definitely was. Somehow he made a career as a balloon maker.
I would not be surprised if he had leverage and pulled some strings and was like, hey, get these to my house ASAP. Or maybe even they helped him. I don't know. But it's one of those things to where it's certainly but this is also a movie where he's 78 and he's in as great condition as he already is.
Yeah. Yeah, because, he, unlike Charles Muntz, we see the physical, the physical stuff that he's doing. He's riding his chairlift down the stairs and then going to his rocking chair outside and walking to the mailbox. That's it. That's what he's doing. So, I mean, yes, there is something to be said for kind of the energy that you can get when you are motivated, but there is also the reality of a 78-year-old body. But yeah, I mean, that plan looks like it would have taken months. So if he did actually pull it off overnight, if nothing else, he didn't sleep, and Grandpa needs to take a nap. So yeah. But yeah, so oh, okay. Yeah, this was a question I had. So number one, I don't know why he waits to implement his plan until the Shady Oaks people come to pick him up. Obviously, it's for dramatic, all that kind of good stuff. But within the logic of the story, I'm like, why would he wait? I don't get that. But they come to the door and he gives them a suitcase. I'm like, what was in that suitcase?
Oh, I think absolutely nothing. I think nothing.
Okay. I think it's either nothing or okay. I've got to tell a personal story for this to make a little bit of sense. But I used to be part of a theater group. We were a traveling group that went around, and we had lots of different members. And when we weren't actively traveling, we lived at a home base in Tennessee. And we had a couple of guys that decided they were going to leave. And instead of just telling us, hey, we don't want to be here anymore, we want to leave, they decided in the middle of the night to jump out the second-story window and walk to the bus station and then, leave from there. I mean, had they told us, we would have helped them. I mean, we wouldn't have necessarily but they didn't have to leave in the middle of the night and jump out of a second-story window. And here's the thing. We know exactly what they did and how they did it because they left a note not telling us why they were leaving, but detailing the conversation they had of them deciding to do what they did. Why? I don't know, but it was literally like, we should leave. Yeah, we're gonna wake up so-and-so. No, it's fine. Just tiptoe around him. Oh, okay. Yeah, and like they wrote down their conversation like back and I was like, what? This makes no sense. But what was so funny about it is that they came up with this ridiculous plan, and at the end of it, they signed it, "See ya, suckers." And I was just like, what? So in my mind, inside of that suitcase, Carl has written down the entire conversation of him deciding this plan, and then at the end, "See ya, suckers."
Oh my God. Well, that's so funny because I was thinking just now, if there was something he was gonna put in, it would be some kind of like gag item, or like he wanted to like do something, give them the middle finger. Because here's to answer your question of like, why did he choose then to take off? And here's part of what I think the reasoning is like these little, as much as we talk about how quiet he is, he's a bit of a stinker. Because like, one, we have his conversation with Tom where he talks about filling the CEO's or the corporate executive guy's car engine with prune juice.
Prune juice, which is great.
Second of all, we know from the trailer, it's not in the movie, but when he
sorry, just real quick, what I love about that detail is because he used prune juice, he did that so it could be no question as to who it was.
Mm-hmm.
Which is great.
100%.
Signing his work.
That's the joke, is that, oh, it's this old guy. Of course he did prunes, and they reference prunes because of the dogs. Yeah. But like we have the scene in the trailer where it's not in the movie, where after he leaves, he like blows a raspberry at them. The guy is the guy's a bit of a stinker and wants to give the middle finger to them. That's why he times it the way he does. Sure. And I think in actuality, like, he's not worried about getting caught. He doesn't care. I think he just wanted to take off. Yeah. No, I mean, there definitely are some thematic reasons for it, but I'm just like, if you're leaving, leave. But okay, yeah. I will say, one thing that I love about that takeoff sequence is that it is, I mean, yes, regardless of what they do, it's 100% unbelievable. There's no way that would actually work. But I love the way that they pulled it off, that they did make it look difficult. We are seeing pipes bursting and all of this stuff, like, you know, the ground and things on the bottom of his house breaking and things like that. We are seeing this. So it actually, even though it is a completely impossibility, it is lending credibility to this fantastical situation. And I love that. They're showing like how thought out it was. Whereas, first of all, I think, and this is a big thing that I always notice when I watch, is I think when we think of the image of the house with the balloons, we don't realize just how many balloons there are. When you look at like when he first takes off, the size of the collection of balloons dwarfs the house. It's like nearly 3 times as large. Because first of all, it's more. You need that many just to even make it somewhat reasonable. But then you have the intricacies of like, he's strategic with how many he cuts off at any given point when he needs to direct it. He has the curtains that he uses to guide it. I love the makeshift sails, and I also love that he uses the same thing that Ellie used as a kid. You know, turning the wind. I can't think of what it's called, but the rooster on the top, the wind thing. He uses that same device to steer the house, and I'm like, oh, that's a really, you know, sweet addition there. But it's some great stuff. I will say, and I'm sure this is a question a lot of people have asked, I'm sorry, where the hell was Russell when the house actually took off? Because he was not on that porch. No, and he, you know, I think he did mention that he was like under the porch. I know Doug says he was under the porch, which
still, is a little
Yeah.
suspect. But
It-
I'm like, unless he just ran and jumped on top of the porch as it was taking off, I don't. And I feel like the construction workers would have reacted to that. I don't know how he got there.
I mean, no, that's an absolute example of suspension disbelief, because you cannot realistically have him on there and have the sequence look as gorgeous as it does. I think the closest is he mentions that he was under the house looking for the snipe, which was actually a mouse. And he just very quickly climbed on once the house had taken off. I think that's probably the in-universe example. I don't buy it, though.
My only other thing about that, and I just thought about this, Russell's mother has to already be terrified, because this means that he has been gone all night looking for a snipe and has now so even before this crazy adventure that he's about to go on, she already is like, where is my son? So yeah.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine, like, the fact that she's like as calm as she is when she's at the award ceremony. It's like, oh, I guess the dogs won her over and she's at peace now. But that's all that you can be said.
Yeah, honestly, there's a few things that I'm just like, I feel like she'd have a lot more questions, like the whole, and it destroys me every time, but Carl putting the Ellie badge on him, and I'm just like, that is so sweet. And that by that point, Russell knows what a big deal that is. But at the same time, mom's got to be thinking, why does it say grape soda? It's like, what? I sent him to get a badge from this company. We actually paid quite a bit of money. Can we please actually put the badge on there?
I mean, honestly, probably at that point, she was just so lucky that he was in one piece after being gone for basically a week.
Came back and well, because at that ceremony, they make it look like they just got back. Yeah, and I'm just okay. Did we order this badge ahead of time? Did we somehow get a hold of a cell phone while we're in mid-flight to say, hey, get the badge ready, I'm coming home? Like, what? How did, I mean, obviously they did it for the thematic reasons, but in story, it makes no sense. It's like, okay, you had time to order a badge, but you didn't have time to take a shower?
No. Here's the other thing that I saw. I don't believe for a second this is the reason, but I thought this was kind of an interesting theory. It's very clear that Russell's parents are at least separated. So,
which honestly, I love the way they reveal his backstory. It is so natural the way that is done. The whole, you call your mother Phyllis? Phyllis isn't my mom.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I mean, obviously we get it way before Carl does, but it's like, that's like, oh, wow. Yeah, it's so well done.
Can I just say, it's absolutely hilarious the number of theories I've seen regarding who Phyllis is. Because I feel like it's extraordinarily obvious that she's either a stepmom or a girlfriend.
Dad's girlfriend. Yeah, absolutely.
I've seen everything from his secretary, his maid, Russell's sister, which I'm just like, like, if you want to get super technical, there's nothing that disputes that.
Maybe the secretary and also the girlfriend. Maybe the maid and also the girlfriend. But yeah, it's obviously she's associated with Russell's dad. They are romantically connected. That's weird.
The whole thing is weird, but I thought it was kind of entertaining because it's like such weird headcanons. But you know what? People, that's like what we're doing. They want to theorize. They want some absurd explanation for things. But I do love that scene too. I have a friend who is just as obsessed with Up as I am, and he always says how that scene really gets to him every time because it just shows Russell's innocence as a child and the way he just kind of matter-of-factly talks about his dad not being around and his who I believe is his stepmom kind of telling him like, hey, stop bothering him. And he's like, he's affected, but he's really not showing it that much.
Yeah. Well, and also like something else that I get from, I don't think it's particularly that scene, but another scene where he's talking about his dad is he's talking about how him and his dad used to hang out. And I'm just like, it's even sadder because it sounds like at a certain point, he was a good dad, you know? And it's just like,
Yeah,
that's
I
really
agree.
sad that not only does he not have a dad, but he has a dad that used to give him attention and spend time with him and now can't be bothered. And that really sucks.
It does, but I think, and this is going to tie to what is a larger part of the movie's thematic significance to me. I think what that scene does, it ties into, because I think to me there's a parallel between that and Carl and Ellie not being able to have their own kids. It's the significance of, yeah, we all have like this idea of biological family, and like they're like we always have them, they're supposed to be there, but there's also the significance of there's people out there who are your found family who sometimes will count even more. And I think that's a great example of that, because the obvious takeaway is Russell becomes like a surrogate son to Carl. But I think it just shows like the depth to which that can go to with the relationships you foster with people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I also noticed that, I mean, it's not just that, but it's, when he loses, Ellie, who he does end up eventually connecting with as a child, something he and Ellie were never able to have. So it's that much more, poignant kind of thing. But yeah, so as we're going through, obviously they are, they're flying, they get out of the city, they almost immediately run into a storm. And I gotta say, one thing I want to mention quickly about the storm is I love that shot showing the scale of the house next to the storm. It's like, because they make it look so tiny, and it's just this beautiful shot, of that, and the storm looks so menacing, and the house is, not only multicolored, but full of colorful balloons. So it's this juxtaposition in so many different ways. But I was also, I'm like, he is so worried about all of his stuff. I'm like, why didn't you like bring down all the breakable stuff before you started flying around? It's like, did it not occur to you that this stuff might fall while I'm in the air?
It didn't, but to be fair, I feel like that's the kind of thing that a lot of people probably would overlook, like just totally mindlessly. And no, by all means, as soon as he realizes it, he tied it all down.
Oh, absolutely.
And Russell makes a big deal of it.
I also think that that's part of his connection, that it needs to be where it belongs. I feel like him taking it down sooner would have been too healthy for him. I think it would have been too much of I can let go of this needing to be where it is, for possible safety, rather than I'm not going to think about this not being where it's supposed to be because I want it to be safe, So yeah, I think that that's just part of his emotional journey. But yeah, obviously somehow the storm, Russell also says that he, helped pilot or whatever after Carl fell asleep, but somehow after between that, they already are in South America. And I love that somehow they are as close to Paradise Falls as they are. Obviously it's a bit contrived. Fine. There are a lot of things in this film that are contrived, but the sign of a good film is that you can have things like that. You can have things that don't make sense, but if it's a good film, you don't care. And like I said, a lot of this stuff I didn't notice until the fourth, fifth time watching it. So, it's all right to point out these silly little things because they don't hurt the film. They're just fun to be like, oh, I never noticed that before. That's weird. Yeah. Kind of thing.
Oh yeah, but especially hard agree on you don't focus on it when the movie is so fucking good.
No, but something else that I love is Russell has gotten them to South America. And at this point, he's still like, oh, I need to get to Paradise Falls. And what Russell is like, if I get you to Paradise Falls, will that earn me my assisting the elderly badge? I'm like, Russell, you got him to South America. I think you have more than fulfilled the qualifications of assisting the elderly.
Absolutely. That's just what makes him so cute and endearing. He's just a little kid who doesn't realize like the scope of all of this.
Well, and at the end, I love the whole thing, but there's the whole thing when he's pinning the badge on him and he goes, for assisting the elderly and going above and beyond the call of duty. And I was like, absolutely fucking right. My God. It's like, I don't think any of these other kids have flown an old man to South America in their makeshift house balloon and, fought off evil people. And, I think, yeah, he's definitely gone above and beyond the call of duty here. But yeah, so, there's some things here and there. There was a point at which, when, Russell's volunteered to help him and Carl's like, all right, but no rap music or flash dancing. And I was like, flash dancing? I don't think he even knows what that is.
Oh, I know. That's such a cute, little moment. It's corny as fuck, but it's again, and the whole thing is they're playing on him being a doddering old man, but it just works. It's so earnest in the way he says it, but it's I love it anyway.
Oh yeah, it's great. And then there's a brief scene, the scene where we meet Kevin. Right before that, we basically they're both going to use the restroom, and Russell is so excited about the thought of being able to use 3 leaves to use the restroom. I was like, yeah, that novelty's gonna wear off quick. That's not as exciting as he's like, I've always wanted to try this. And I'm like, yeah, you won't want to do it again. As a child who grew up, my father loved camping, so we went camping all the time. Most of the time we would bring toilet paper, but occasionally, you'd have to improvise. It's not a fun thing. I'm just gonna say that. But yeah, we do in that scene get introduced to Kevin, and I love the trope that she basically just imitates the behavior of whatever's going on, to the point where I think Russell or somebody pats Carl on the head, and so that's now how Kevin shows Carl affection, is she pats him on the head with her beak. I love that little touch. And we get the whole thing where when Carl is trying to send Kevin away, and Kevin's just really bad at hiding, because basically her way of hiding is just hiding her face, but her body's huge.
She everything about her is just so adorable and hilarious again, and ways that are admittedly kind of stupid. But I think what is funny about her, especially the sequence with Russell when he first meets her, when he's using her as the little pair of stilts, and that to me is also a testament of animation, because that in CG and in live action will look stupid as hell, but it just works. It's such a stupid visual gag that works only because of the medium it's in. But her design is creative, her little mannerisms. I can see how people might not be invested in her or be annoyed, but I think she's just charming as hell.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I will say that I think in a lot of watches, she is often the character I forget about, But when I do pay attention to her, she is rather entertaining. She's just not necessarily the one that sticks out to me the most, probably because of the next character that we meet, the talking dog, Doug, which, and apparently they did bring in like an animal behaviorist because it wasn't just about getting Doug to say what they thought dogs would say, but they wanted to, how would dogs actually think? What would they actually say if they spoke? And as a dog owner myself, they got it spot on. I have just met you and I love you. Yes, that is a dog.
Well, something I read about that specific line is apparently, I think I could be wrong, it was Bob Peterson who came up with it, because he used to be a camp counselor and a kid said that to him. And that is the cutest thing I've read. And that's the thing, like a lot of people talk about how like I love dogs and kids, and it's like that is something a kid would say.
Yeah, oh absolutely. And when he basically pulls a Russell and ends up on the porch, and he opens the door and he's like, I was hiding under your porch because I love you. Can I stay? Oh, yes, you can stay, Doug. And that's when we finally get the scene of, well, of course you can. You're my dog, aren't you? And I'm like, yay.
And that's the greatest thing. And that's like, again, it's so simplistic and like almost to a point to a fault. But the switch around when Doug obsessively talks about his master, but then like once he sees Carl in trouble, and when he tries to stop all the other dogs and starts referring to Carl exclusively as his master, that's such a sweet moment. Like, and it's like in this huge frenzy and act like one of the most action-packed sequences, but like that sticks out to me so much.
Yeah, I mean, Doug is definitely one of the characters that is the most memorable to me in this film. Like I said, partially because I have a dog and it just rings so true. And, I don't know. I can't remember. I don't want to confuse it with, because there was the short that they did the same year as Up that basically with Doug that led up to him meeting, because one of the notes I wrote down was, we don't really know why the other dogs sent him away. Well, that short explains it. But they did a series of shorts that they put out last year, and it was actually really timely and actually really kind of sad to watch, because it came out around the same time that Ed Asner died. And it was a really sweet series of shorts between Carl and Doug. And I mean, just reminded me how much I loved the character, but was also really good at showing, this relationship now. But because they established in the film that Russell is not allowed to have dogs at his apartment complex. So of course, Carl said he was his master. Of course, he's going to take Doug in, but it just kind of established this relationship. And even with a talking dog, there were misunderstandings, and I'm like, that's great. Even though now you can actually communicate, there's still a miscommunication because he's a dog. He thinks differently. Even if they could talk to you, they still wouldn't completely understand what the fuck you're talking about.
No, and that's the funniest thing is like the little associations, because like I love the small mailman joke. I love the way I love the squirrel joke. It's so funny because I read this, and apparently I'm not that well. I love dogs. I'm not as familiar with them to like that intent of a degree, but I read apparently like there are dogs that literally are pointers. So I saw someone like nitpicking like golden retrievers aren't pointers, so Doug shouldn't have been doing the pointing joke, and everyone's like, calm the hell down, it's just a joke, because even that little thing is so funny to me when he does the point.
Sure. I mean, pointing, I think, is more, oh well, I was about to say it's more typical in bird dogs.
Mhm.
And golden retrievers can be used as bird dogs. I had well, had my brother had a golden retriever that lived at our house. And this dog would basically try to hold your hand. It is a trait in bird dogs where they have basically this innate sense of holding things in their mouths without biting down. So the dog would come up to you and try to put your mouth in its hand. Of course, you know, your hand's now right on its tongue, so it's real gross and slobbery. But at the same time, it's like, oh, that's sweet. He just try to walk along with you holding your hand. But yeah, you know, eventually you'd take it out and just be like, lovely. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's not. I've never really, you know, I never used, we had a lot of dogs that could be classified as bird dogs or even pointers. We never trained them to do those things because we didn't do those things, you know? So, yeah, I mean, it might be a thing. I don't care. It's still cute. It's dog. It's a dog. I mean, I will say, because we are introduced to the idea that Muntz has dogs in that little thing, and I feel like in the newsreel they look like all the same breed, whereas when we get to Paradise Falls, they're all different breeds. You know, you've got a Doberman, you've got an English Bulldog, you've got a Golden Retriever, you know, and a bunch probably of mixes in between of a lot of those. I will say, probably at that point, there wouldn't be any purebreds. So Doug probably would have been, you know, a more likely a mutt, as would all of the other dogs. But again, I'm not mad at it. I don't care.
Here's a really dark theory I read explaining like how he has all the breeds.
Yeah.
He took them from the people he killed.
Honestly, okay, because we, you know, when we do eventually meet him, he doesn't explicitly say that he killed them, but he has all of these busts or these things filled with like the little hats and goggles, and I'm like, are those from all the people who were trying to steal? Did he kill all of them? And then, of course, I wrote down, you know, because there's the scene where, you know, when Russell thinks that Carl isn't going to help rescue Kevin, that he tries to go off on his own and gets caught. I wrote down, okay, if we weren't sure that, because, you know, before that, it's like, it's a little ambiguous. Okay, yeah, he's selfish. Yeah, he wants to get this thing done, but how evil is Muntz? Did he really kill these people? If we weren't sure, he then attempts to kill a child. Okay, yes, he's definitely a bad guy. We got that. It's like,
unambiguously.
Thanks for clearing things up, Pixar. Really appreciate that.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think, you know, honestly, a lot of this stuff we've mentioned before. Oh, there is the quick scene. I love the bit where they're sleeping in the frog rivets and he hits it like an alarm clock.
Oh yeah.
What I love the most is the frog's reaction. He's just like, "Fuck was that?" and just hops away.
Yeah. That was a cute like visual. I love it. It's so small, but it was a nice little detail.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, you know, they meet Muntz. I will say again, we're, you know, like I said, there's some contrivances here. The fact that the tree clearance for the house, at no point do they have to like maneuver the ropes around, you know, limbs or anything like that. The jungle is perfectly meant for them to be walking through it while toting a house above them. And the fact that the cave is big, well, I guess the cave for the dirigible because it's even bigger than the house. That does actually make sense. But yeah, I was just like, okay, a lot of things are really convenient, but again, I don't care.
Yeah, it's convenient. I think they try to get around that a little bit because it certainly does crash into things every now and then, but just not enough, but like beyond like what you would expect it to happen.
But this is not a this does not strike me as a forest where trails have been cut. There's going to be a lot of, you know, they in a jungle as dense as it looks everywhere else, they'd be hitting limbs with their, you know, at the very least their you know, the hose and all the what they're, you know, the house will get caught all the time. But you know, then the story would take 10 times as long, so we're not gonna mess with that. But yeah, let's see. Oh, I made the note when Russell tries to go rescue Kevin. I think he takes way too many balloons. I don't think he needed that many balloons.
Probably not.
He's a tiny little child.
Yes, but he's an explorer. He probably wanted to over prepare than not.
Right. And so then after that, and I said I had something to say about this. We get the scene where he, you know, he finally turns. I mean, didn't do it intentionally, but I guess he just always assumed those pages past what I will do are blank. And I guess the idea is it just would have hurt him to see that, you know, because he made a promise that he would take her to, and they would fill those pages together. And I think that he felt like he had let her down by not doing that. And so I think that's why he never went past it, because it would hurt too much to remind himself that he, in his head, failed her in that way. But then he sees that, you know, there was more, that obviously in her mind, the adventure that they had together was more than enough, that it was, you know, it you know, that's the adventure that she ended up really wanting.
Oh yeah. I mean, but, to me,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to move on to another subject, so you're good.
Oh, I was going to say, like, to me, like, aside from the beginning, from the opening, the famous 10 minutes, that's the best part of the whole movie to me. And that's why when people try to make the argument that everything after that is bullshit, it's like, but that scene is so touching, and it ties such a neat bow on that beginning of the movie, on all of Carl's expectations and what he was striving for the whole movie. Like, that's too important to not give any credence to. And that's honestly like the closest thing to being as tear-jerking as the beginning of the movie. And it's so sweet. And again, I think it's another part of the thematic importance of the movie is that adventures are what you make of them and who you spend your time with more than anything else.
Yeah, no, it's definitely some good stuff. But, you know, at that point is when he feels like he can let go of this stuff, because it is more important for him to save Russell and Kevin than it is for him to hold on to this stuff. So he immediately starts dumping everything out of his house. But I made the note, I was like, I feel like if he had gotten rid of because the last thing that he dumps out is like a cooler or a freezer or, you know, some sort of refrigeration type unit, and the house leaps after he does that. I'm like, I feel like if he'd gotten rid of the heavy appliances first, he could have kept a lot of his stuff. I mean, yes, it wouldn't have had the same emotional resonance, but, you know, I'm like, I feel like he, like I said, it means something different. And then we wouldn't have gotten that image of the two chairs sitting next to each other, at the falls and all that kind of good stuff. But I'm just like, I feel, especially because those appliances, unless he's got a generator, are useless. There's really no point to those appliances. So, you know, dump the fridge, dump the stove, you know, dump, you know, that heavy ass stuff that you need to plug in that you got no power. Dump all of that stuff and then see how much else you need to get rid of. But I get it. But yeah, we get then they keep using the leaf blower as a weapon. I'm just like, I don't think it's a great weapon. It just blows in there. Yeah, I mean, Russell is really the one that uses it as a weapon. Carl just uses it to mess with people. But I'm just like, I don't think you chose the best weapon there, Russell.
No. He's also 8, and I'm kind of glad he wasn't aware of how to fight.
He didn't need that. Okay, yeah. So after he is caught, he is explicitly tied up by the dogs. Again, how the hell are these dogs doing all this stuff without opposable thumbs? I don't. How did they?
I don't know either, but it's funny you mention that because, again, we talk about how a lot of people dismiss the entire movie past the beginning, which to me is an absolute bullshit argument. No, I'm not going to take that seriously unless you tell me what is actually wrong with the rest of the movie. Well, and one of the points of interest that people say is, oh, the dogs in the plane are so stupid. It's like, okay, but the movie itself is inherently ridiculous. That's the weirdest point of contention. And one person I know, and it's kind of clever, is like, oh, fighter dog pilots, oh yeah, we get it.
I think that's fun. I mean,
I love it.
It doesn't make any fucking sense, but at the same time, and I love that their bullets are syringes. I'm just like, okay. I mean, I feel like that's more of a gag than anything, because Muntz has shown us that he has nothing. He is fine killing people. So I don't know why, we're just, I mean, I guess the only thing I could think of is if, that was explicitly set up so they could use it against Kevin, because they don't necessarily want to kill Kevin. But, for any other use, I'm just like, I don't know why they couldn't have just used bullets at that point. I'm like, okay, it's definitely a gag at that point, but if that's the case, then I don't know, use rubber bones. It's like, I feel like there's better jokes than syringes there, but okay. But yeah, I will say, and I'm sure there's exceptions, but I guarantee you the majority of the people saying, oh, it's not as good after the first 10 minutes have probably not seen it in a couple of years. They're probably just going, because like I said, the first 10 to 15 minutes is what you remember. Right. But when you watch the movie, the whole thing is good. It's really good. Well, it's really fucking good.
And that's my biggest thing. It's like, if it's not someone's favorite, I'm not going to fight them on that. What I don't understand I've come across people who think it's actively bad. And it's like, I just don't understand. There's nothing incompetent about it. Yeah. Yes, the entire thing is absurd, but y'all are totally cool with a lot of other Pixar movies that are also absurd. So I feel like it's just a very weak argument. And again, if it's not your cup of tea, because by all means, some of the jokes are super on the nose and corny and playing the stereotypes. It's good. It's still funny though, and a lot of it, I think, some of the jokes are clever, and it's like a lot of that I've also never seen before. So honestly, and here's the other big thing is I would argue, in addition to the beginning being the best thing that Pixar has done, I would even say, barring Lexo Jr. and the famous ball, I would almost argue that the image of the balloons in the house is possibly the most iconic Pixar image. Think of all the other films. There's not a specific image or graphic or scene that plays out in my mind that I quickly associate with Pixar more than that house.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's absolutely an indelible image. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, like you said, yes, there are things about this film that don't make sense. But number one, a lot of them I didn't notice until the third or fourth time I watched. And again, to your argument, it's not Cars. So
Oh my God. And here's the thing. I also can, even though I don't agree, I at least can also understand the people who say, "Oh, they think it's overrated," because it just has like it has such a high standard it has set that it's inevitable. So I don't even like hate. I can't even shit on people who say that. But I'm ready to fight anyone who like wants to have an argument about it.
Yeah. All right. So I think the last note that I had is, and again, this is something that I thought of for the first time, obviously, he ends up letting go of the house as, to save, Russell and Kevin and Doug. Charles Muntz falls to his death. And apparently there were a lot of discussions as to what should happen to Muntz, if he should, learn a lesson, if he should survive and not learn a lesson, or if he should ultimately die. And ultimately they decided, no, he got to go. I mean, he's 1,000 years old, so
Yeah.
fine. Plus he's an asshole, so he's fine dying.
Exactly.
But they get to fly the Spirit of Adventure home, and it hit me. I was like, Ellie would have loved that Carl got to fly the Spirit of Adventure.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. That would have just been, yeah. It's like you feel like if because Carl does the thing throughout the movie where he talks to Ellie. Now, in a lot of cases, he basically talks to the house like he's talking to Ellie.
Right.
But that if he was able to, call up Ellie and be like, "Hey, I got to fly the Spirit of Adventure," that would have been like, the biggest fucking thing. That would have been phenomenal for both of them.
Yeah, I would imagine that her reaction would be she wants him to be happy and to do the things that he wants above all. But that there's like the inner like adventure geek in her that's like, oh my God, that's so cool though. So
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, they would have geeked out about that. Yeah. But yeah, so before we move on, are there any things that we haven't discussed that you wanted to talk about?
Nothing like we hit all the major points that I want to touch on, especially with just the thematic significance of this movie and the way like all these little things play into it. I will say like just one small note is I somehow always missed this until my most recent viewing. In the scene when the house is first taking off and you have that little girl who is in like a high-rise apartment and the balloons like kind of flash across her room because she has like a huge window, and then she like turns around and
colors on the carpet. Yeah.
In the left hand corner of her room is a Lotso. I did not even notice that until this.
Yeah, there are a couple of times, because Toy Story 3 was the very next movie.
Right.
There are a couple of times where Pixar will make a hint to a film that is not yet released. There is a film that makes reference to I believe, it's in is it Finding Dory? Yes, Finding Dory. They make reference to Santa Cecilia, which is where Coco takes place.
Right.
Very next film.
Oh, even like a further back example is in Monsters Inc. Boo has a Nemo toy that she hands to Sully.
Right, so which was again the next film. Yeah.
Which is so cute. I love it.
Yeah, no, there's
didn't know that before.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. All right, so at this point in the podcast, we like to rate the film. And this isn't, your typical like star system or anything like that. We do this on a tier system. We have 4 tiers to choose from. There is the top tier, if you've ever heard the term top tier Disney, it is the best of the best, the cream of the crop. Just your absolute favorite. And as a reminder, these are your personal feelings, not what objectively, it's your own personal rating. There's also the second tier, which is these are good. Maybe they're not the best, but they're solid films that are really good. The third tier, which is they're all right. They're definitely not the best, but they're not horrible either. They're just kind of like, in there. And then you've got the fourth tier, which is not really even a tier. It is the vault. It is they are those films that basically we believe Disney should throw in the vault, lock away, and just kind of forget they exist. So I don't really have to ask, but I'm going to anyway because it's part of the podcast. Nicki, where would you put Up?
I mean, I feel like you really don't have to ask. This is too much of a foregone conclusion. It's a top tier Pixar film. It's a top tier anything related to Disney film. It's top tier animation. It's top tier just film in general. I can go on, but let's leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I honestly solidly agree with you. This is a top tier Pixar film. Again, if you would have asked me, I mean, yes, I have watched it twice now within the last 2 months. But if you had asked me probably before I rewatched it the first time recently, I probably would have said, oh, it's like second tier. It's really good. Maybe not my favorite, but it's really good. After rewatching it, I'm like, no, this is a fucking good movie. This is really solid. And like I said, part of why I say that is because it is doing so many things. There are so many fantastical elements that, in my opinion, all of them are being knocked out of the park. They're just absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, I completely concur. Top tier Pixar. With that, want to let everybody know how you can get into contact with us. Obviously, we are the Flying Cow. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at the Flying Cow Pod. You can also email us at theflyingcowpod@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook group. Just type in The Flying Cow. You will see us there. Also have the YouTube channel where we have movie battles. You should be able to find the Flying Cow channel if you just type in The Flying Cow. But you can also type in The Flying Cow movie battles, and that will absolutely take you right to us. We've got a lot of great things on the way, so make sure to check all of that out. Now, Nicki, going to give you the opportunity. If there is anything personal you would like to plug or anything that you are enjoying, feel free to, take this time to do whatever.
So as you talked about, I've been on movie battles quite a few times. So if you want to see me compete in Disney Pixar trivia, you can check me out there. I'm not super active on social media, but if you are curious, you can find me at Twitter at egglordnicki. That's Nicki, Nicki. And I gotta give a big shout out. My wonderful boyfriend Pat has a channel called The Montyverse on YouTube, where he does a lot of really awesome comic content. He just did a huge overview of all the Comic-Con announcements for Marvel. So please check him out there, where I also do some trailer reactions with him. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, again, Nicki, thank you so much for being here with us today. This was so much fun. Always enjoy talking to you.
Thank you so much. I concur. I'll take any opportunity to talk about the wonderfulness that is Up.
Absolutely. And I hope all of you guys enjoyed this as well. And join us again for Dis-cussions and anything else that will be on the Flying Cow podcast feed. But yeah, until then, moo.
Moo.